So FPL deals with some of the most extreme environments on the planet. And speaking of extreme environments, that reminds me of October 17th, 1989. Do you know where you were? My husband was at the World Series in Candlestick Park. I was early in my career in Silicon Valley when I heard the roar and the rumbling sound. It sounds like thunder, and all of a sudden the floor began to shake, and you're like, oh no, but then it was really bad. It was so bad that usually you can walk down the hall. I had to dive under my desk, and you started hearing all the stuff dropping, people screaming. I was screaming out for my boss, my dear mentor, Susan. It was crazy. And then once it stopped, we're like, oh my gosh, that was a big earthquake. I immediately picked up the phone. You call your mom. Mom, hey, we've just had a big earthquake. It's really awful. And my sisters were also on the line, because remember, in those days, everybody had landlines and multiple phones. We're like, yeah, right. You're exaggerating. I'm like, no, it was really bad. And then a minute later, I started to get some feedback that it was the type of magnitude. So I went to call them back. You couldn't get a line out. You couldn't call for days anywhere. So then I got in my car. What happens? Everyone's in their car. Guess what? Roads are closed. There's no electricity. There's no signals. I'm like, oh, this is really scary. I went to my cousin's house, and we camped out outside their house because we were afraid to stay inside. And it was pitch black. We ended up camping outside. We were afraid, we were worried about gas, so we turned off the gas. Worried the water was contaminated, so we didn't drink any, couldn't drink the water. We had sparklets or whatever it was at the time. And that experience changed my world. I thought, wow, I've been taking a lot of these things for granted, right? It's like things are fragile. And so once you live through that disaster, you're changed and you have a different perspective. And while there's no way to predict that earthquake, we've come a long way since then with technology and many of the innovations that we'll be talking about during this conference. So we are much better now at preparing, responding, and recovering than ever before. 7 years ago, Itron began commissioning independent research to gain insights into what utility executives and consumers think about issues surrounding how energy and water are delivered and used. Last year, we asked executives for our report, hey, how prepared does your utility feel to recover from disasters? The majority, 57%, said, hey, we're extremely prepared. Great. And then we thought, well, what about everybody else? So our new research findings, which were announced this morning and available on itron.com, delve into this in much more detail. And it's so timely given the fact, I just read last night there was a typhoon in Japan. The Bahamas are still recovering from Dorian, and there are still tornadoes. We had tornadoes in the Midwest this year, record numbers, and of course the wildfires in California. So this year's study addressed kind of three main areas: understand concerns that consumers and utilities have about the types of natural and man-made disasters, understand their perceptions about how the utility is dealing with those, and then learn about the technologies and programs that utilities are using to deal with disasters and educate their customers. So over the summer, we surveyed 500 consumers, 300 utility executives, and I'm going to present some of the key findings today. But first, I want to get your perspective, so get your phones out. Have you been impacted by disaster in the last 5 years? Yes? One person said yes, I can see. Just put Y for yes and N for no. Okay, so it's shaping up to be about 50-50 or 50-48, or let's take a look at what the response said in the survey. According to our research, 69% of utility executives and 55% of consumers are more worried about a disaster hitting today than 5 years ago. And another important stat that came from the survey was that 68% of consumers believe the increase in weather-related disasters is due to climate change. That's what the perception was. And those are pretty eye-opening, and whether we agree on the root cause or not, disasters are increasing, and we've got more statistics that basically say that, right? Since 1970, there has been a 4-time increase in the number of disasters worldwide. Nearly 9 out of 10 consumers in this study said they have been impacted by a disaster in the last 5 years. And as Tom mentioned, last year alone, we had 14 separate billion-dollar-plus events. This is the new normal. So let's see what the utilities ranked as their top concern. Who here thinks it was wind, tornadoes, or hurricanes? Raise your hand if you think that was a #1 concern. Come on. 2 people? Okay. The #1 concern, cyber attacks, overwhelming amount. And it's no wonder every day utilities across the world are subject to hacking attempts, denial of service attacks, and a variety of other cyber threats. The threat is so top of mind that we aim to do our study next year on this topic and really delve into what we need to do to be better prepared and protected. I know this is a key concern for our industry. Second was earthquakes, and maybe it's because of their unpredictable nature, followed by extreme wind, tornado, hurricanes, and temperature. And then we've got drought, flooding, wildfires, and volcano eruptions didn't even register. I guess we had no one from Hawaii answering the survey. So these are the top concerns for utilities. Next, we wanted to explore how are you all preparing for disaster? So let's get our phone out one more time. This is a multiple choice question too. There we go. So how equipped is your utility to prepare for disaster? A, extremely equipped. B, somewhat. C, not at all. And D, I have no idea. Okay, well, this is pretty interesting, actually. The majority of you are answering somewhat equipped. Let's see how the survey said. In our research, utilities said 71% said they were extremely and very well equipped. So it's interesting here, we got mostly somewhat equipped. And in the survey, it said 26% said somewhat equipped. But we ask consumers, what their perception is. How prepared do you think your utility is? And guess how they answered this question about your preparedness. Surprisingly and sadly, they said 32% were extremely confident that you had it under control. And 36% said somewhat confident. You know you're more prepared than that, but your customers don't. So there's a gap, right? But that one that can be bridged with ongoing educational outreach and communication with your consumers. I know how hard this is because I'm in marketing, and the rule is it's not just one and done. You have to have an ongoing calendar, ongoing activities of sharing tips, tricks, and guidelines. You need to have education out there talking about all the steps you've taken. And it's best to do it on an ongoing basis, not waiting until an emergency happens. And that repetition is so important because in the survey, 83% of the utilities said, hey, we've deployed our education programs to help consumers prepare. But less than half of the consumers, 42%, said they even received any materials. So just because you do it, you have to do a lot to keep people engaged through a variety of channels. Social media, good old-fashioned print, publications, advertising, et cetera. So for the remaining utilities in this survey, and maybe for the rest of you in this audience that feel less prepared, it's helpful to think of things in 3 different categories: prepare, respond, and recover. So we took a look at all the technologies in those areas to see what people are using and are planning to use, and there's much more information in the actual study. The good news is that there's a lot of innovative technologies out there available for you. According to our research, AMI was #1, 64%, and that's the foundation. That's got your secure multi-application network that we've been talking about, attached to these sensors and smart meters, remote disconnect to shut off an emergency, predictive analytics, and we heard a lot about that from FPL's work, and real-time monitoring from weather stations, temperature sensors, and video cameras. And those drones were so cool, Christopher. I mean, talk about real-time monitoring. And we've got some new innovations down here as well. Tom referred to the work that we're doing with New Cosmos and Con Edison with the methane detection. And we're also doing field trials on our pole tilt sensors. Really important when that pole is leaning over that you know about that before something really bad happens. So let's take a look at Respond and the technologies for disaster preparedness. Again, you see AMI, outage notification and restoration systems, remote disconnect, real-time monitoring. But now you also see things like line and fault sensors to tell you what's happening with those power lines, really important. And you also see evacuation systems and different types of communication systems. Again, much more detail in the report. And in terms of recovery, you're going to see more distribution automation here and data analysis software. So great, we've got these technologies, we know they're out there, so why aren't we deploying them? What's holding us back? Number one, prioritizing which technology to invest in was a primary barrier. Second biggest barrier was navigating the regulatory space. Now the good news is we've got 2 talks this week, and we are very, very excited to have the president of NARUC here, Nick Wagner. He and Dan Pfeiffer will be doing a big picture session this afternoon called Getting to Yes. And we also have Commissioner Brian Sheehan here from Illinois, who is also doing another talk tomorrow with our customers with Duke Energy, as a matter of fact. So you'll have more opportunity to explore that. And you can see the other issues. Funding, we need more money. But think about it, though. Regardless of the root cause of these disasters, man-made, natural, intentional, accident, climate change, they are increasing, and that is our new reality. Christopher and I were talking the other day, and he said to me, this is a forever game, and it certainly is. And it's especially challenging given the aging infrastructure, not enough funding, competing priorities, and regulatory hurdles. However, we can overcome these challenges, and that's what we're all about here today and this week in Florida. And because we've got this fantastic ecosystem of partners, our network agnostic approach, and affordable solutions, you'll have an opportunity to also learn from your peers, our partners, and the Itron team, and just know that you are not alone. You have a community, and we are in this together. So thank you, and look forward to talking with you later today.